My goodness, there's a lot of you. On Memorial Day, no less. Thank you for coming out. Happy Memorial Day, and you've made me feel very welcome in Maine. 1963 Cadillac. I named him Ernest. After Ernest Tubb, who's an old country musician, if anyone knows. He had a great hit back in the day called Walking the Floor Over You. But I'd always been a collector of old things. Now on TikTok, which we also gravitated towards in 2020 because we were all bored and we were losing our minds. On TikTok, it's the really wacky, wild, sort of clickbait things that people seem to be interested in. So I was looking for a video idea in these old collections that I had. And I was thumbing through some old cookbooks. So I was thumbing through, it was an old 1915 Five Roses flour cookbook, which is a Canadian flour company. And I was flipping through, and you see sponge cake, you say, woo. You see brownies, you say, woo. You see pork cake, you say,
pork cake? Pork cake.
What? So I said, hold on. And sure as night follows day, it was a fruit cake with a pound of ground pork in it.
What are you doing with that pork? Oh, you know, just baking my cake.
I said, this would make a very, very good video idea because it's absolutely insane. That, this must have been a mistake. It was printed in a cookbook, and I baked it. It's very strange. It smelled very strange. Sure. And as I say, it tasted like a question mark.
It tastes like a question mark. A good question mark.
And that's how I got started. And, it just blew up from there with lovely folks such as yourselves sending in these old cookbooks for me to sort of bake from. Some of them were targeted. Some were really, really bad. But some were good. And then as far as like cookbooks are concerned, you think it would be a lot more glorious, but after my videos started, really ramping up and the quantity that I put out, one day I got just in my email inbox from Penguin Random House, from DK. Which was like, would you ever be interested in doing a cookbook? Which is so strange because I was still in my pajamas. The email was right next to an Amazon shipping notification that my socks had, socks, book, and then an American Airlines flight reminder. So that's how things started.
That's so funny. Just the likelihood of all of that coming together. And, that resulted in your first cookbook, Baking Yesteryear, which was a huge success. Hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller. So I have to ask.
Yes, my YouTube content, those take a long time to film. I'm known to repeat my statements to make sure that they come across well. Specifically things like eggy. And synonym. And blue
He said the line.
Now, doing that for an hour-long YouTube video, that would take a long time. So I would be a bad fisherman because I get myself caught in the line. But the important thing, and to answer your question, before Baking Yesteryear came out, I signed for this book. And I was so excited. And because it required so much research, I hit the ground running. So I did not have too much time to myself. So after this tour, maybe.
So what is your worst recipe you've tried that you've never uploaded?
So the worst recipe I've ever tried that I did upload had the wonderful title of a yum yum salad.
A yum yum salad from '79.
It was awful. 2 boxes of lemon jello, a 20-ounce can of crushed pineapple, half a pound of cheddar cheese, half a cup of vinegar, pure unadulterated vinegar, Which at that point, that's premeditated.
This is just premeditated.
And then they give you a choice. Like when you're on death row and you get to choose, your execution style. They say, would you like pickles? Would you like olives? Anyway, that was the worst I've ever tried, and that, of course, was online. Now, the worst dessert that I've ever tried on sort of TikTok that I didn't upload was a chocolate potato cake dessert that I left in the oven.
How long?
I put that in around 2 p.m. And by the time happy hour came around 5 p.m. I knew it because my neighbor was right outside the door, and I was laughing with my friends. And my neighbor's like, Dylan. I'm happy to report that there was no fire, only smoke. But I did have to taste it. Do you know that rubberized sort of like stuff that you find in some children's playgrounds? It tasted like that. So that was the worst. That was the worst. There have been some misses, but not as bad as that. It was burnt to high heaven.
On the opposite side, what recipe tasted best that you expected to be god-awful?
What recipe tasted best that I expected to be god-awful? I think it truly would have to be, this goes way back, and there's a representation of this idea in baking across America, but it was the tomato soup cake.
A tomato soup cake from 1950.
Now, it's a spice cake with a can of condensed tomato soup. Now, how and why that came about, you don't know. Again, we can go back to the idea of substances that weren't so savory. But I thought, there's no way that a cream cheese, chocolate frosting, tomato soup cake with a whole bunch of cinnamon and cloves in it, there's no way that could be good.
Clove, cinnamon, and nutmeg. With the soup. Can't hide from me. I wish you could. Bloop. Cinnamon. No.
But it was good.
Ah. Shut up.
Now, there were some others that were wonderful. But that was something that really should not have worked.
Doesn't taste like tomato. Tastes like chocolate.
And the recipe represented for New Jersey in this book is called the Black Magic Tomato Cake. Because it's a chocolate cake with a can of condensed tomato soup. And on this store, I've already been served it twice. People love it. So yes, that to answer your question, tomato soup cake.
What's the best gluten-free recipe you have ever made?
The best gluten-free recipe that I've ever made. Now, I want to say 2 years ago on TikTok, I was looking at an ingredients list that had me go out to the store and buy 2 20-ounce cans of pinto beans. And there was a recipe called a pinto bean cake.
A pinto bean cake from 55.
Now, the pinto bean cake made me laugh so hard because it's 2 huge cans of pinto beans, a whole bunch of salted peanuts, honey, 5 eggs, butter, and leavening agents. Yes, I do mean 5. You're quite right to call me out on that. And then it's blended all together with your eggies, and it made a cake. Now, nowhere in the listed ingredients were there ever any cake ingredients. And that was the best gluten-free recipe that I had ever made. Now you gotta be careful with some of the beans, because sometimes, they say it's like oats. Oats have no gluten in them, but if you just buy oats, you have to buy gluten-free oats despite the fact that oats are gluten-free. And it's just the facilities in which they're made. But that was the best gluten-free recipe.
Did you create any of the recipes?
Did I create any of the recipes? Do you mean book-wise?
Yeah. Did you make them all?
I had to make them all. Now, to explain the process of how they're baked, I would line up, take the recipe for the blueberry buckle, for example, from Maine. I would have 10 cookbooks. They would all list their blueberry buckle ingredients. One would be from 1930, one would be from 1960. The majority of them were sort of around 1970. And I would have to bake them all, me and the recipe tester, it wasn't just me. And then I would pick the ones and pick the elements of those recipes that did the best. One tasted really, really good, but it was burnt by the time it was baked. One was baked in the 9x9, the other was baked in, 9x16, 9x12. That was good. And then you pick and choose and you make an amalgamated recipe. The difficult thing about a lot of recipes in Baking Across America and Baking Yesteryear is they didn't include any instructions. Some of these old recipes would just say, blueberry flour, bake. Or bake as you would a cake. My favorite was actually bake until done. So even though, the idea and the names of these recipes, they're of course not mine by any means. You have to really fill in the gaps and make it replicable in modern kitchens. Now, the one thing in Baking Across America that I did, that I should have done, it's my biggest regret that I didn't do in Baking Yesteryear, is give a bibliography. So in Baking Across America, in the back of the book, you'll find a big page of size 8 font of every single cookbook that was used to do those amalgamated recipes.
First of all, my sister and I would personally like to thank you for coming today. Because of your inspiration, we ordered Baking Yesteryear, and yesterday we made your famous 1932
Peanut butter bread from the Great Depression.
I can ask for her too. Just what's the story behind that? Because it turned out really well.
I'm so glad you like that recipe. The Great Depression peanut butter bread. That's I think that's my most viewed video. Which is so strange. I'm talking like 35 million, which is insane. Because it's a quick bread, very simple, with just a bit of peanut butter. What's shocking about that, to tell you the story about it, in the Great Depression, depending on where you were, Mainers would have been okay, actually. Perhaps not important. But in the major cities, or those built-up cities like Portland, to find butter, to find eggs, to find fresh ingredients was very, very difficult. The Great Depression, the response to that was not the same across the country. If you were out, in the boondocks, not in the boondocks, but if you had a farm, you were all right. If you were in a rural area, you were quite fine. But the majority of America's population could not find butter. And if they did have the chance to find butter, they're not going to waste it on frivolous desserts or frivolous breads. They're going to use it for their cooking. They're going to use it for their dinners, lunches, breakfasts, to feed the family. So the issue is that all of these quick breads, all of these muffins, they couldn't be made. How do you replace butter? Now, during that same time, Peter Pan was the first commercially available peanut butter.
Peter Pan came out in 1928. Brave King. I waited until 2019.
Now, here was a product which was, by all accounts, butter. It was shelf stable for years, and it was canned, and it was so cheap. Peanut butter and strangely like Kraft mac and cheese. That's what you could find in Joe's during the Great Depression. So someone's quite simply just had the bright idea, what if we replace the butter in a quick bread with peanut butter? And that also had a bit of added sugar in it, so you didn't have to waste money on sugar. It made a stable, nice loaf that rose beautifully.
We want the bread to rise, not generate thrust. On this episode of Bread Goes to Space.
And had a beautiful crumb.
That's a good crumb.
And you had this fantastic, cheap, quick bread, and you got to save your butter.
So good with so little.
So that was the long story. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. But I love these things. But that's the story of the peanut butter bread. It was just a great, and it was born of really, really hard times. And the fact that that can still taste good today, that captures a lot of the magic that I find in these old recipes.
Oh, that's good.
Do I ever inflict my worst recipes upon my friends? In short answer, no, I do not. Because I like my friends. Now, if I get invited to a potluck, and I don't like those people there, I'll say, yes, of course, I'll bring a dessert. Yes. Baking things that are unsavory is a great way to ask those people to never ask you to bring things to the potluck again. But no, I'm joking. I have them test. A lot of the things that I bake, the questions that I get is, Dylan, where do all of these things go? You obviously don't eat the darn things. No. And which I do. It's just my family genes. Once I turn 40, it's all downhill. But for now, I look kind of svelte. But no, in Laramie, there's a roller derby team called the Nausea Fines Roller Derby.
Oh, nice.
And they're friends of mine. Hopefully they stay friends of mine. And I give them a lot of the extra things that I bake, either for test. They were the taste testers, outside of the big round of taste testers that tried things for baking across America. And yes, I did offer them the Yum Yum sandwich.
I mean, it tastes like a pathogen.
And they said, no, you can Yum Yum yourself all the way home.
What is the weirdest, most interesting flavor thing you've ever made?
Ooh, you're speaking of interesting flavor combinations?
Like interesting and weird.
Well, I know we talked about the tomato soup cake. That's a strange one. If we go off of TikTok, there's a few flavor combinations that I really like that are perhaps not well known, but I would highly recommend. Have you ever had a bit of watermelon with balsamic vinegar? That is surprisingly really good. You add a bit of feta cheese on there, and that's really, really good. So I was just in New York, I'll tell you this. And this is something that I do make, so it does pertain to your question. But also I made the mistake of ordering this in New York. I go up to a bagel shop, and I ask for a bagel. And I like my bagels with cinnamon raisin. I do. I like a cinnamon raisin.
Yep.
But I ask for chive cream cheese.
Not in New York.
And the volume of the entire establishment. And I felt eyes on me.
Yeah.
And I have never been asked if I was sure. Something going to say, are you sure? And I said, well, I guess. Just raise eyebrows. Anyway, I love raisins, cinnamon with a bit of, as Matt Rothbard put it in New York, who is a podcast host for Taste. He said, a bit of allium, which is the flavor profile, or like onions. It's really, really good. So that would be my answer, is if you can, because it's almost, summer, unofficial start to summer is today. It's a bit of watermelon, a bit of balsamic vinegar. I bet you'd like it. And then if you graduate up from there, give some raisin, cinnamon, chive. is there a recipe I could not include in the cookbook? The West Virginia pepperoni rolls were one of them. I wanted to include it, but it was far too difficult. Anyone here from Maryland? We got one? One for Maryland? Two for Maryland? Oh, a couple, yes. Sorry, notice my glasses are in my pocket. Anyway, in Maryland, they have a recipe called, oh, there you are. There's a recipe called a Smith Island cake. And it's a fantastic cake, but it's got about 42 layers in it. And it has to be like super thin. It's not 42, but it is about 9. Too many layers. And it's a very delicate chocolate frosting. And you know, it's great. I wanted to include it, but if you know, you and I baked this now, we'd have it by Christmas. And you'd have 3 dishwasher loads. So I said, that's just a bit too much. I can't include this. So we went with the burger cookies from Maryland, which is good. So yes, West Virginia pepperoni rolls, Smith Island cake from Maryland, and there must have been a few others, but no, those were the big 2.
What is next on your list of things you might do for us in the future?
What is next of the things I may do? Well, I'm super excited. You ever been looking forward to like a vacation for so long? You ever been looking forward to a move for so long, or you've been looking forward, I don't know, something big has come, and you're in the middle of it, and you're loving the ever-loving daylights out of it. Isn't it a bit hard to think beyond it? And I worry that maybe, you know, I'm almost 30. I should have like a life plan.
Oh, still a baby.
But no, the response and my ability to be able to do this does a funny thing for your aspirations. Insofar as you have so much fun, it's so wonderful to be able to see you guys in front of me. But that's all I want to do. So I am going to answer your question, continue to ride the wave. So long as there are strange gelatin molds, more yum salads, and more wonderful creations to explore, I'm going to be doing that online. Now, if there's another cookbook, well, we should wait to see how this one does. That's from a publisher's perspective. I would love to do another one, but no, I think I would probably just spend a year, eat a lot of food after taste testing a lot of food, and keep doing weird, wacky recipes online. Thank you.